Hi, and welcome to this session about how you can connect your business warehouse queries to your SAP Dataverse Cloud Tenant. My name is Jascha Kangisa. I'm a product manager for data warehousing at SAP, and I'll be giving you an overview about the different problems that we currently see today with other on-premises applications, how we want to solve that with SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, and how you can extend your BW and BW for HANA system to your Dataverse Cloud Tenant. And I'll be giving you a demonstration of the solution that we already have today, plus an outlook on what's to come with BW for HANA especially. So the problem that we see with our today's on-premises application like BW and BW for HANA is mainly that even though there is, as you can see it on the left, that well-governed, secured, and trusted central company data system already available, for example, BW or BW for HANA, that stores all the central data models and data, that is still very IT-centric and driven by IT, and it's not really useful by the business that also needs to work with the data. And as well, the IT support that business would need in order to work with the data only focuses on that central system, BW or BW for HANA. Now, the problem that we see with this approach is that since the business does need to work with the data, they would start offloading the data from the BW system, moving the data out of the control of IT, and then share that with other departments, apply whatever the transformations they would need to the data, add additional data to it, so that they can eventually suffice their reporting and analytic needs. But the issue with that is that nobody anymore knows about how current the data is you're working with, whether there are duplicates of that data you might want to take a look at as well. And there's no way to trace back the source of this data. Also, from an IT point of view, you do not know with whom the data is shared and whether it may also have left your company. So with Dataverse Cloud, we are trying to exactly tackle this issue. We see that with Dataverse Cloud and the approach of establishing one semantic view across all the data sources that you connect to it, you can build an environment and an infrastructure that offers you a complete end-to-end solution. So you still keep all the benefits that we saw on the previous slide by having one central, governed, trusted, and secure system that is still controlled and administrated by IT. But on the other hand, we can move all the processes that were now still outside that system into this very same governed, trusted, and secured place that we can create by using Dataverse Cloud and using and applying that on top of the different data sources that we need to integrate to establish a harmonized and one collaborative layer and environment. So this, of course, not only focuses on BW and BW for HANA to be integrated with Dataverse Cloud. Of course, with Dataverse Cloud, we also want to connect to other SAP sources in the cloud or on premises, plus non-SAP sources like on different hyperscale environments like AWS or Azure, that you can combine all these data sources in Dataverse Cloud in a federated or replicated way based on the specific use case that you are pursuing and the different needs and SLAs that you have for your analytic and reporting scenarios. By connecting the different sources to Dataverse Cloud and not only providing an environment for IT to work with the data and data sources, we also build and offer an environment that also the departments and LOBs in the company can use to still work on all the different processes that we saw on the previous slides, to follow whatever data transformations, data acquisitions, local data they need to work with. We do not take away any of that freedom the LOBs and departments got used to. But in addition, we remove all these uncertainties like the data cannot be trusted. You do not know whom the data is shared with, whether there's an update to the data you might be informed about, by moving all these processes into Dataverse Cloud and therefore onboarding all the different groups of people and departments that would need to work with the data in one central governed environment. Next to all the other data sources that you can connect to Dataverse Cloud and where you can consume the data federatedly or either in an acquired or replicated manner, there's something specific about the connectivity to especially SAP BW and SAP BW for HANA. You can establish a connectivity to these sources, just like you can establish a connectivity to any other source that you can connect to Data Warehouse Cloud. But because these are very central SAP applications and systems, and they also all play in the area of data warehousing, we are focusing on a real native integration with BW for HANA especially. As you can see it depicted on this slide, there's two ways how you can connect to these applications. On the one hand, there's what is already possible today, the flow depicted in blue, where you can basically connect to all the different data sources like data store objects, info providers, and characteristics for master data to any BW application running on any database on HANA or BW4. Now, what you lose with this approach is basically all the semantics that you had defined in your BW system. And this is exactly what we are working on with BW for HANA especially. In addition to the data access that you receive with all the BW applications, with BW4, we are working on an approach that you can leverage also the semantic metadata models you built in BW, that you can export them from your BW for HANA system into SAP Data Warehouse Cloud. And then instead of redefining all the semantics on top of the data you connected to federatedly or virtual, also out of the box automatically get a full model imported into Data Warehouse Cloud so that you do not have to rebuild the semantics, but directly can start consuming the data, combine it with other data from different sources, and build your analytics cloud story on top of this. This takes away lots of work you have to reapply, like lots of efforts that you already did or that you already put into building these models in a very governed and trusted and secured way in your BW applications, giving you benefits of an easy reuse of these semantics by leveraging the individual entities that we would use in Data Warehouse Cloud to represent the very same business semantics, KPIs, and the like. Now let's take a look at how that actually looks like in the system, how you can already connect to a BW application today, and what we'll be delivering next year in the first version, especially for BW for HANA.
All right, so in your Data Warehouse Cloud tenant, first thing you have to make sure is that your data provisioning agent is connected and that the ABAP adapter is enabled. In order to create a connection, I'll now create a new space that we'll use for demonstrating this. I call it SAP BW. Make sure to add your user to your space because otherwise, for example, things like checking the connection validity would not work. And then go ahead and create a new connection. So there's different ways. I'll now choose the SAP BW connection. You could also choose the SAP ABAP connector if you wanted to. Select the right DP agent, give it a name, and then go ahead and enter the needed connectivity details like the application server, client, system number, a technical username, and password. After we've done that, we can check the connection for validity, making sure it's working as expected. And after a few seconds that we can see that this one is valid. We can now go ahead and use this connection in the data builder, in the view builder, for example. So we could create a graphical or SQL view. But before doing so, let me just briefly show you how the scenario actually looks like so that you get an idea what entities we are working with. So on the BW side, as you can see it in the modeling tools, I created a query, which I'll be also using later on to demonstrate the integration with BW4 to you. The query contains some data, as you see. It's some product data for sales orders and some amounts. And this query is based on a composite provider, which in turn, if we take a look at the scenario, then contains two advanced data store objects. And these objects, they also contain some characteristics, for example, the partner ID or currency, the sales order items. Data store object also contains the product, for example, and these characteristics then also contain some attributes. So if we now take a look at how this looks like on the Data Warehouse Cloud side, once we connect it to the BW system, you can see that because we are connecting via the operational data provisioning framework, all the entities are exposed via the extractors, and therefore we do not see them as single object, but rather we look at the data storages of these objects, because of which, for example, you see that there's a attribute and text data set exposed for the very same characteristic. We saw earlier for the sales orders that there's one fact data set exposed for all the providers that we can use. If we had exposed that query we saw as an info provider, there would have been also one entity, one remote table, as it's called from Dataverse Cloud point of view, for the query. Now I'm just going ahead, and as you can see, all these entities to Dataverse Cloud, they simply look like remote tables. And because of that, I can also work with the data, just like I can work with data coming from any other data source. So there's no difference in what functions you can apply. And this is also what I'm demonstrating to you right here, because we lose the semantics, we only get access to the data. I have to redefine, for example, all these relationships again. Things like compoundings, or that the attributes data set is actually related to the text data set of the same characteristic, is something that Dataverse Cloud doesn't know about. So I have to redefine the joins myself and the relations to, for example, the product category as a compound characteristic to my product. Another good example is, even though I get access to the data, as you can see it right here, I can see all the same data that you can also saw when I demonstrated that to you in the modeling tools. But the system, like Dataverse Cloud, doesn't know, because I imported the provider view first, that it should be treated as an analytical data set, and that it, for example, contains a currency column. Same goes for the measures. So I have to redefine all this myself again. And if you imagine that this now is, you have to repeat that for many, many queries, you can imagine that this is quite a huge amount of effort that you have to apply right here.
All right, cool. So now let us check how the very same scenario looks like if you connect a BW for HANA application to Dataverse Cloud and use the new SAP BW for HANA model transfer import feature to get the query into your SAP Dataverse Cloud tenant.
So what you have to do is first that you need to explicitly expose any query that you would like to consume via this new connection in SAP Dataverse Cloud. There's a dedicated transaction available in your BW4 system, coming with SP7, BW4 2.0 SP7. And here you basically select the query that you want to make available to Dataverse Cloud. Reason is why you need to expose that explicitly, because not all the features are supported as of now. So for example, for variables, you need to hard code the parameters or the input before you can expose it. So you select the query, you might get some warning messages that certain functionality is not supported, and then you can release the query. In Dataverse Cloud, you now have to make sure that for the SDI connector, the HANA adapter is enabled, and we need the SAP Cloud Connector to be connected to your system. So in the analytics side, you go to administration, to the data source configuration tab, and you need to make sure that you have configured a sub account on the one hand in Dataverse Cloud. In your Cloud Connector installation, you have to also configure the sub account. And what you have to make sure as well is that you then go ahead and create a cloud to on-premise connection. So this connection is basically pointing from the Cloud Connector to your BW system using HTTPS. So make sure to select the right protocol, enter the internal host and port, and to open the needed URL paths. In this example, I'm just allowing all URL paths or endpoints to be accessible via the Cloud Connector. And then one last thing you have to do in the analytics perspective on the analytics cloud side in Dataverse Cloud is that you have to create a tunnel connection via the Cloud Connector that you have just configured to your BW system. Then next, we can go ahead and create a SAP BW for HANA model transfer connection in our space in Dataverse Cloud. So I'll again navigate to my space management for the sake of demonstrating that. I'll be now creating a new space called SAP BW for HANA. And in here, again, I add my user so that I can validate the connectivity. And then I'll create a new connection that allows me to connect to my BW for HANA system. So now I'm not using the SAP BW connection, but I'm using the SAP BW for HANA model transfer connectivity. Again, give it some name, choose the right data provisioning agent where the HANA adapter is connected. And now you have to select the tunnel connection that we created earlier. In case of my scenario, I will not validate the server certificate. And again, enter the HANA credentials, username and password, because this is needed when actually executing a query to retrieve the data from the system. Now we go ahead, and this time we start from the business builder, where we go ahead and import the model. And now you can see all the queries that we have previously exposed on the BW side using the transaction RSWC query. So what you also now see is that the system proposes different entities to be generated, and this is exactly what you get for free with the integrated BW application, where we do not only give you access to the data, but we also honor the semantics that you have already defined within the data models that you created on the BW side, like the query, like the composite provider, and so forth. So as you can see, it's not only the data that's being taken over, but also all the entities do already relate to each other, so you do not have to redefine that yourself. Things like measures and attributes are already defined the right way. So this you also do not have to redefine yourself. And if you take a look at, for example, now the underlying composite provider model, this has already automatically been linked from the business builder to the respective data builder entities. Because, like I mentioned, this is always by default a federated scenario, and therefore we also need the remote tables to be generated and so forth. Another good example is, which we see here, that also the relations between the attributes and the text table, for example, for this product characteristic was already set up correctly. So there's no need for me to redefine all these things like I have to do it with BW, but I could immediately benefit from the semantics that I created and directly start consuming that in my data model. So here again, we see that it's a remote connection by default, but we could then also leverage the different facilities by Dataverse Cloud, for example, for replicating the data.
All right, so now that you're getting good insight into what is already possible today and what will be possible next year with BW for HANA, I would like to point you to these additional tech ed sessions where you get a deeper insight into these specific scenarios we just saw. There will be also a hands-on session available where you can try out the integration with BW for HANA. And I would like to point you also to the public websites where you can get more information on the different solutions and products. Make sure that you continue your learning experience with SAP TechEd and the different resources. And that also brings me to the very end of this session already. I would really like to thank you for attending this session. And I hope you could get or gain new insights into what will be possible with a hybrid integration with SAP Dataverse Cloud and BW for HANA.